All right, good evening, CMST 320. My name is Brendon Favre, and this is the Chapter 11 and 12 discussion response for Chapter 11, Question 2. After giving a presentation, what measures do you typically use to gauge the audience's response? Elaborate on the reasons for choosing your method of preference. Describe how you analyze the audience before and after your speech. And how did your past analysis differ from what's advised by the text? Be specific and cite the text in your response. All right, so before giving a presentation, I like to give a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about and discuss what the learning objectives are going to be for the presentation. I feel by doing this is you're giving your audience a heads up. Hey, this is what we're going to cover, and they can kind of follow along too with the certain talking points. And then you also have what the purpose is. You're telling them why you're here, so they know that they're here for a reason. You're not just wasting their time. I also like to ask a few questions to the audience about the subjects that's going to be covered. I find by doing this, it helps get them involved early. It gets them thinking about the subjects we're going to be talking about. It can kind of catch them off guard and, kind of put them on their heels a little bit, which might make them pay attention a little bit more. And it also helps me assess their knowledge level about the subject, which is good to know if you have people in the room that are subject matter experts or novices, so you know how in-depth or what terminology and stuff like that you can use. At the end of a presentation, during the conclusion, I like to go back over what the learning objectives were. So I want to reiterate, this was the purpose and this was the objectives that we hope to accomplish during this presentation. I like to ask a few more in-depth, kind of elaborate questions to see if the presentation was effective. It's kind of like a pre-test and a post-test. And the last thing I like to do is, some of the military folks in here are giving me a rough time about this one, is I still like to do after-actions reviews. I hated them in the military, but they are effective. It's a good way to get feedback on how you did as a presenter, what worked well, what didn't work well. You might have thought your audio was well and everybody in the room could hear you, but there might have been a guy in the back that couldn't, or stuff like that. Just different ways. The projector, they might not be able to see the screen. Stuff like that, just to help you next time, things you might not have picked up on or you might not have known. And lastly, for this question, when given a presentation, I follow a lot of what the book says. It's got a lot of good advice on it. I think it kind of beats a dead horse, but the information's there. It's kind of what you take from it. In section 11.1.2, the book provides tips and strategies to decrease anxiety and increase your poise. They are, don't procrastinate. Obviously, the sooner you get this done, the better off you're going to be. You plan your presentation, you're going to be more at ease with it, knowing that you've refined it, you've gone over it a couple of times instead of waiting to do it the night before. You need to know your audience. You need to know who you're speaking to. You're going to be more comfortable if you can make the connections with your audience and you feel like you kind of know them more. Recreate the speech environment where you're going to rehearse. Again, this is going to help you out with your audio. Setting up a projector if you need to. You're going to know if the room echoes, if there's a lot of sunlight, how big it is, how many seats can fit in there, how many people can fit in there. Is the room big? Is it small? It's going to tell you all these different things. And it's also just going to help you give that speech. You're going to be more comfortable in your environment. There's not going to be something to catch you off guard. Visualize your success. Obviously, we want to picture us, getting that round of applause or a standing ovation at the end of it. Next is going to be breathing. Breathing is huge. I use I think it's the 4-4-4 technique, where you take in 4 deep breaths, you hold them for 4 seconds, and then you exhale for 4 seconds. This does a really good job of just kind of calming you down and getting that, your blood moving and your brain saturated with oxygen. It's just a good way to get rid of some of that anxiety before you go out. Channel your nervousness. I'm not really 100% sure what that means. I'm guessing it's just kind of like a good vibes type of thing. Just kind of, tell yourself you're going to do well. And then the last one being give yourself a pep talk. You want to tell yourself, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to kill this, I'm going to knock it out of the park. I find a good way that always helps me is I don't give myself any options. I don't have the option to fail. I don't have the option not to do it. It's I have to do it. I need to get my mind wrapped around I need to do it, and I just need to knock it out of the park and do the best that I can. And I find that generally works pretty well for me when giving presentations. All right, moving on to Chapter 12, Question 3. How should one prepare oneself for responding to questions following his or her presentation? Assess the various ways to neutralize hostile questions, cite the text, and include examples in your response. All right, so in section 12.4 of the book, it discusses how to prepare for follow-up questions. It states that you should prepare for them, okay? So when you're planning your presentation, you need to try to anticipate the types of questions that are going to be asked. So when you're putting your presentation together, maybe if you didn't elaborate or go into depth in one subject, ask yourself, is this something that somebody could ask me to elaborate further on? Or, try to plan out what you think people might ask questions about while you're doing your presentation. Repeat or rephrase the questions. This has several purposes that it serves. It gives you time to think about your response. So as you're reforming their question, it kind of gives you a chance to get your mind back to that subject a little bit, so you're not caught off guard, and just gives you a chance to sound a little bit more educated. It allows for the entire room to hear the question. So if that person might be asking the question from the front row, and it's a large audience of 100 people or so, and you have a microphone, it's just going to let you project louder to make sure everybody in the room can hear that question. It might prevent that question from being asked twice. And it gives you a chance to rephrase or paraphrase the question to shorten a lengthy question, or kind of take some of the hostility out of it. The hostility is going to come from the emotion that's put into the question. So we have to remove those emotions and just get to the meat and potatoes of the question. A lot of the time we can eliminate some of that hostility with it. And then you want to stay on subject. The audience may ask you something that's off topic. You just want to do your best to keep things on track and stick to your timeline. You want to listen carefully when somebody is asking you a question. When you're being asked something, you want that person to feel like they have your undivided attention, which they should have. You want to make eye contact with them. You want to lean forward, and you want to show them that you're listening and you care about what they have to say. And another one is going to be signal when you will end your Q&A. So, tell the audience I only got time for one more question or two more questions or whatever it might be. This will help keep things on subject, and it'll help the presenter keep things on a timeline and keep things organized. Now, for the second part of this question, assess the various ways to neutralize hostile questions. Hostile questions can actually be beneficial if responded to correctly. If an audience member asks a challenging or hostile question, use it to your advantage. You're going to have, it's going to kind of catch, I think, everybody catch everybody in the room off guard, and you're going to have the entire audience's attention because they're going to want to hear your response to it. So you can rephrase the question, and like I said earlier, you can remove the emotion from it so it's less hostile. By doing that, you're again just getting to the base of the meat and potatoes of it. You want to acknowledge their emotion. I understand why you feel this way. You don't want to make it personal because it's not personal. Even if the person is personally attacking you, you don't want to stoop to their level. It's unprofessional, and it's not going to get you anywhere. So there's just no real point into debating into it. And get to the heart of the issue. Restate your evidence to support your stance on that. And maybe try to rephrase it in a different way or repackage it in a way that they might understand it. Something that makes sense to me might not make sense to something else. Somebody could be a visual learner over an audio learner or whatever. That's going to be part of catering to our audience. It's going to be impossible to cater to every single individual in the audience. We just want to try to cater to our target audience. And then if we need to elaborate further or organize our thoughts or present it in a different manner, we can do so for the individual's sake. And let's see, get to the heart of it. So, and then the next is going to be, if you don't know a question, don't guess. Just tell them you don't know. You don't want to make something up on the spot so you sound intelligent. If somebody else might have the correct answer to that, and if you try to BS them, they might call you out on it, and you're going to lose credibility in that way. So it's just best to be honest. Say, I don't know, but I can find out for you. And lastly, it's going to be brief. You're not here to argue. You're there to, you're here to give your presentation. You're not here to argue with somebody. You're not here to change anybody's mind. You're here to put out some information. Well, if you're persuading somebody in this presentation, then you are trying to change their mind or persuade them to think the way you're thinking. But you're not there to argue with them. That's not going to accomplish anything. You're just going to go back and forth with somebody. You're not going to change their mind. They're not going to change your mind. So it's just kind of a moot point. Keep your answers short and to the point. And again, this will help you keep everything on track, on time, and the way it needs to be. And all of that can be found in section 12.4 of the book. But thank you for listening. I hope you all have a good evening and are excited that this is the last one of the semester and no more RRPs. Thank you and have a good night.